director is Dr. Peterson. He's an associate professor in the philosophy department. He's the chair of the faculty senate. For Loyola, he was a lecturer in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Toronto, Mississauga. He received his doctorate in philosophy from the University of Toronto, and the areas of interest that he teaches in are political authority, social justice, criminal punishment. He is philosophy of law, political philosophy is focus. So you can go ahead. I think you have a presentation.
I do. I have a PowerPoint, so I'll just try to put this up here. All right, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here and very happy to be able to have the opportunity to present some of my ideas about the honors program and what I would like to do as if I were selected to be the director of the program. So I've had the chance to teach a few honors seminars and in my time here at Loyola, and I've always been really inspired by them, by the conversations that happen in these seminars and by the work that you guys write and produce for those seminars. So that's always been a really rewarding part of the experience of teaching here at Loyola for me. So that's part of what makes me very enthusiastic about this opportunity. So before I turn to talking a little bit about my vision for the honors program, I want to just tell you a little bit more about myself. So as Grant mentioned, I've been here at Loyola since 2011. I did my PhD at the University of Toronto, and I have a master's from Boston College. Before that, I went to a small liberal arts college called Calvin College, and there I was actually, at least for my first year, in an honors program as well. As for a number of reasons, I didn't end up continuing in the honors program, but one of the things that I really remember, well, two things I really remember from my experience there was the way that the professors in the honors seminars were really, really inspiring. I remember a classics professor reading the Odyssey out to us in Greek. These things that stick with me 25 years later. And the other thing that I remember that really struck me about that, was the people that I met in those seminars, and many of those people I'm still friends with now, and I'm still inspired by the amazing things that they're doing. And so for me, that was a really kind of formative experience. And so again, that's something that matters a lot to me. So we kind of went over all of this, so I won't spend much time on it. Some of my specific research interests are on punishment and incarceration and on cultural heritage. So in terms of punishment and incarceration, I've been working on some arguments about private prisons. What's wrong with private prisons? Why is it a bad idea from a moral point of view to use private prisons as a way of punishing people? And then the other thing that I've been working on quite a bit is cultural heritage. And cultural heritage raises some really interesting philosophical questions. I'm focusing a lot on questions about preservation of cultural heritage sites and artworks and archaeological sites and those kinds of things. So just sometimes some of those things come up in regular life, and some of the issues that those raise come up in cases of armed conflict. So you might be familiar. Here's just one example. This is the Temple of Bel in Palmyra in Syria. It's one of the best preserved of the ancient archaeological sites. Well, sorry, it was one of the best preserved ancient archaeological sites until 2015, when it was blown up by ISIS. So one of the questions that I'm interested in when it comes to questions about armed conflict is, oh sorry, I have a picture of it being blown up too, is the question of what we can do to defend sites or objects when they are attacked or destroyed in cases of armed conflict. So I've been working on that question as well. I'm also working on a book chapter for an invited for a volume on cases where cultural heritage is kind of a bad thing. So what do we do with Confederate monuments and things like that? So that's some of the work that I've been doing. When I'm not teaching or researching, I like to hang out with my 4-year-old daughter, and I also like to collect records, so especially funk and R&B from the 70s and 80s. So I couldn't resist putting a picture in here. This kind of combines both those interests. This was when she was a bit younger with her first musical crush, Lionel Richie. She's moved on to Little Nas X, but that's the record she used to regularly pick out of a big stack of records and make me put on songs. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about my vision for the honors program. One of the things I want to emphasize is that my goal isn't really to change the honors program in any fundamental way. I want to build on the strengths of this program. I think there's a lot of really great things about the honors program. I want to build on the work that Dr. Yavna did. I want to build on the work that Dr. Berenson has done. And so my goal is really to just build on that legacy of academic excellence and achievement, and to build the honors community as a kind of community that's oriented to Jesuit values. So if we're thinking about what kind of director of an honors program I would want to be, a couple of more specific things that I'd like to do. Well, the first one would be to develop a vision for the honors program, and I really would want to do that through a kind of open dialogue and consultation, where I include and encourage diverse views about what the honors program should look like and where it should be going. So I would not want to think about making big changes or pushing the honors program in a different direction without talking to all of you and hearing what you have to say, right? So open and inclusive dialogue is really, really important to me. Second thing I think is important is that I would want to build on what I think of as strong collegial relationships with deans and department chairs and other administrators to make sure that we have a really vibrant set of seminars that meet the academic goals of the honors program and that provide you with courses that you will find rewarding and enriching and that help you to meet your own academic goals. And then thirdly, I want to increase the financial resources of the honors program through fundraising and sound financial stewardship. So one of the questions that I got was, one of the questions that you all submitted, was what would be the first thing that you'd want to change about the honors program? And I really wouldn't be in a hurry to try to change anything without having conversations with everyone. But a couple of the things that I would really do right away, one thing I would do is to sit down with people from University Advancement, because they're about to start a new fundraising campaign, and I would want to talk to them about where honors fits in that, right? So that we can make sure that we have the resources that we need to make this program grow and we really continue with its record of excellence. And then in terms of thinking about, if I could say a little bit about my vision for the honors program, I think of this in terms of 4 basic ideas. So I want this to be a program that recruits talented and ambitious students to Loyola, people like you. I want this program to reflect the diversity of the Loyola student body. I would want this program, the honors program, to be an engaging and inspiring, to engage and inspire the cultivation of Jesuit values. And I would want to form a community dedicated to cultural education and service to others. So I can think of what I would want for the honors program, the vision that I have in terms of those 4 ideas. So let me say a little bit about each of those. So I really want the honors program to bring more students like you guys to this university. And I want it to also be a program that retains people like you and helps you to develop your promise and realize your ambitions. And I think that the more that we can do to attract really intelligent, really ambitious students like you to Loyola, the better that's going to be for the university overall. So that's part of what I see as really important about the job of the honors director. And I would try to work really closely with people like Sarah Kelly, the Senior Vice President of Admissions and Academic Affairs, to find strategies to make sure that we're doing that. The second thing that I think is really important is we're really, has to do with diversity, and I think we're really justly proud of the diversity of our student body here at Loyola, and I think we're justly proud of the diversity of the student body within the cohort of the honors program as well. But I want to make sure that, and I think you represent a class that's diverse along a lot of different dimensions, whether it be socioeconomic dimensions, race and ethnicity, gender, sexual identity, and all those kinds of things. But I want to make sure that we build on that, right? That we continue to build on that legacy of diversity. And I'm fundamentally really, to me, a complete education really requires us to engage with people who are different than we might be. Who come from different backgrounds, who have different experiences, beliefs, values, identities. And so I think that that's important for us as an honors community, that we focus on that. Right? The third part of my vision is the idea of promoting Jesuit values and engaging that cultivation of Jesuit values. And here I think one of the values that really I think historically throughout this honors program has been emphasized is the value of social justice. And social justice is really important to me. A lot of my work in my teaching and in my research focuses on social justice. But the thing that I kind of find inspiring when I walk in front of the library is that all of the list, it's probably actually the best list I've seen of Jesuit ideals is the one that you can see in front of the library. So I actually put it on here just so we can take a look at it. And I think what I would like is to try to create a community here, or to try to foster a community and help to continue the existence of a community that focuses on all of these values, right? That really actualizes these values. And incorporates the whole range of them, whether it be appreciation of things great and small, or an international and global perspective. I think all of those are part of what you do here, but I would like to emphasize the ways in which we can cultivate and develop those values as honors, as members of the honors community. And part of that, I think, for me, is about developing and broadening that community aspect. So I want to find ways to ensure that you guys feel that you're part of a community, and that community is structured by these values, right? So that we can think of ourselves as working together towards the realization of these values. And then the final part of my vision is really the idea of cultural education and community engagement. And so I think one of the ways in which the honors program can embody these Jesuit values is through cultural education, right? I would like to see us as a community engaging with the cultural life of this city in all of its forms. And there's so much diversity. Think about silent films accompanied by improvised pipe organ at the St. Louis Cathedral. You can think about the history of hip hop and bounce music in this city. You can think about brass bands and second lines. You can think about plays and literature. You can think about the sculpture garden at the New Orleans Museum of Art. There are all these different forms of cultural life that are going on in the city, and they're incredibly diverse, and I would like us to be, I would like to have programs that engage us with those, right? I would also want to develop and continue to develop the legacy of service to others that's always been part of this honors program, and I think was very important to Dr. Yavna when she was the director. And I think that one of the things that I would really do is try to build really strong community partnerships that would allow us to engage with the community in the pursuit of social justice and these other kinds of Jesuit values. So I've talked a long time. There are some other questions that you all had asked that I have answers to, but I wanted to stop just for a second. I should probably stop now. But are there any other questions that I could address before I stop? Yes.
What are your visions for the senior thesis?
So this is again one of those things where I'd like to see more, to talk more with people about what works well and what doesn't work well. But I think I actually I'm directing my 7th senior thesis since I've been here, and it's always been a really rewarding thing for me. One of the things I would want to do is make sure that that project goes really smoothly for you, in terms of finding out what you want to, figuring out what you want to work on, and figuring out what you, who you need to work with in order to make that happen. There are probably more specific things I could say once I have more in-depth conversations with you. Yes. Yeah.
So talking about those in-depth conversations and having an open dialogue, how would you go about doing that? Would you like town halls like this, where students can suggest ideas? Would you post meetings at random? Like, what does that look like to get
Yeah. Great question. So I think what I would do is a number of different things. First of all, I would absolutely have an open door policy for anybody to come talk to me. I'll be there to talk with you. Certainly having town halls like this is a good way to get feedback, because I know that you guys won't be shy about telling me what you think we should do. And so I think just using all of the different ways of communication, including electronic communication, to make sure that everybody can feel comfortable telling me what they really think, is what I would be aiming for. Yes?
That was one of my follow-up questions, is how do you plan on engaging the student body on a day-to-day basis with communication, via email, social media, or what is your preferred method?
So I like social media, but I'm at the age where it's hard to keep up at which social media I should be focusing on. So you tell me. I do Instagram, but not Snapchat. So that's probably dating me. I certainly will use email, but I think social media is a pretty important way to do that as well. Yes.
So we've had a lot of changes over the years. With changes in directors, we've also had changes in requirements for how to enter into the honors program.
Yeah.
And I work open houses a lot, so that's a really common question we get. So would you continue the requirements we have now? Would you make them a little bit more lax? Because with Dr. Yavna, it was less about the test scores and more about your want to help the community. But now it's a bit more strict with direct scores and everything. So I was curious about your thoughts on that.
And this is I think I should probably stop after this, but let me say something really quick. I think that academic achievement is important, but it's just one dimension of what we should be looking at in creating an honors cohort. I would want to look at all of the other things that you are involved with, and not just things that are oriented towards social justice, because I think that the extracurricular activities that you're engaged in can express these kind of Jesuit values as well. If you're a great musician, if you're a great writer of poetry, if you are really interested in the stock market and making trades on the stock market, all of those things are relevant to me, and looking, I think, holistically at what kind of person we think should be a member of this community. Okay, so let me, thanks for your questions, and thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. Let me just stop there so that I don't take more time than I'm supposed to. If you have any questions, feel free to just email me or buttonhole me on campus. We'll see where you're at. Thank you.
Okie dokie, guys. So for our next candidate, we have Dr. Kahn. So Dr. Kahn is an associate professor of philosophy, and he's also the current chair of the philosophy department. He received his doctorate in philosophy from the University of Oxford over in England. Before he came to Loyola, he used to work at the U.S. Air Force Academy, and his area of interest includes moral theory and applied ethics, but he teaches courses in political philosophy, philosophy of law, philosophy of mind, feminist philosophy, and decision and game theory. So he's a philosopher. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And in his free time, he does photography, and you should check out his pictures on his website. I did, and they're pretty good. So let's give it up for Dr. Kahn.
Thanks very much. Okay, so there we go. So I didn't realize I was going to get a great introduction like that. There are a couple points in here that I'm just going to zip right through since they're redundant. There. The only thing that is relevant here is I'm slightly under the weather, and I've been guarding my voice rather jealously today. I'm hoping everybody in the room can hear me. If that's not the case, if my voice starts to give out, please give me the high sign, and I'll try to be heard. The situation here is this. I face a kind of dilemma. I've got more questions, I think, than I can answer in any kind of depth. So essentially, I'm either going to give you answers to all the questions that you've asked, but rather superficial ones, or more in-depth answers, but not all. It's a bit of a pickle. That's a philosopher's idea of a joke, by the way. Be sure to laugh, because it doesn't get any better. I think what I'm going to do is choose the latter option. I think that the thing that's most important among the various questions is my vision for the program, and that's what I'd like to talk about the most. In the process, I'll be answering some of the other questions that you asked, and then I'll try to address the others in a rather ad hoc way. We'll see how far I get, but it'll have to do for just now. I will say this, though. I'll make available a written statement briefly that covers answers to all of these questions, so you can have a look at that. And if you've got particular questions you want to ask me, please, another philosopher's idea of a joke. Please email me. My email address is on all of the slides. Okay, a couple things you need to know about my my vision for the program. First, these ideas don't just sort of come out of nowhere. They're not just ideas that I stitched together because they sounded good. They come out of the kind of view I have for the program as a whole in terms of its values. And I explained those in the letter that I originally wrote to apply for this job, which I believe has been made available to you. If it hasn't, I'll certainly make sure that it is.
No.
Okay, so very quickly, the three main areas of value I'm interested in here are intellectual values, moral values, and spiritual values. And among the moral values that are especially important here are social justice, diversity, and service to others. And I'll explain that and how they impact this sort of vision statement as we go. The other thing, or at least one other thing to note about all of this is that my vision really needs to be seen in terms of the short term, the medium term, and the long term, right? Where the short term is essentially 6 months from starting this position. And in the short term, right, my vision for what the director in particular should be doing is maintaining stability through the transition. We're in the middle of an academic year, we're in the middle of an admissions cycle. This isn't a great time for significant changes. There's a little bit more that I've got in mind, and I'll come back to that in just a second. But in the medium term, say 6 months to 2 years, and the long term, here we're talking something like 2 months 2 years to 5 years. I think there's a lot of really significant value to be picked up. Right? There are a lot of changes and enhancements to the program that we can make. And again, I'll outline some of that for you. Third thing I want to mention is this is just one person's vision for the program, and it shouldn't be the case that one person should simply have the ability to decide how the program is going to go. We're in this together, all members of the honors community, all the stakeholders, and I think the future of the honors program ultimately has to be decided by all of those members in consensus. So again, while this is my vision, it's not meant to be rigid or inflexible. It's a series of, I think, pretty good ideas, but it's not the case that these ideas are meant as a sort of dictatorial list of things that shall be done. Along those lines, right, the first thing that the director of honors should do when he or she comes in, right, is listen to all the stakeholders. Right? That's the most important thing, along with stabilizing the program and making sure that it continues to function over the rest of the school year. And that, in fact, is my answer to one of the questions that I was asked. What's the first thing that you would do when you came in as director? And that's the answer. Listen. Okay, so moving forward, right? There are 5 main objectives that are part of my vision for the program. Let me mention all 5 quickly. One is forging stronger and wider connections beyond Loyola, the world beyond Loyola. The second thing is enhancing the honors community. The third is realizing the values of the honors program in the research of our students. The fourth is getting the word out about the honors program. And the fifth is developing a better system of self-assessment. Again, given the constraints of time here, I'll only talk about the first 2, and admittedly, I'll just scratch the surface, but I think I'll give you at least a taste of what I've got in mind. So let me do that now. The first objective, again, is making stronger and wider connections with the world beyond Loyola. That will in part involve enriched relationship with the Office of Community Engaged Learning, Teaching, and Scholarship. I got the acronym right, that's a tough one. So OCELTS has been going through some transitions of its own recently, but it looks like it's back on its feet and moving full steam ahead. So in the medium term, what I see, and again, the medium term is something like 6 months to 2 years. Right? What I'd like to do is generate more service learning opportunities for honors courses. I've taught a number of service learning courses in the past. I've had really good success with them, and I think this is a great way to get folks involved beyond Loyola. In the long term, I think we can go even farther with that. I think we can start to develop internships with these community partners. We've got a lot of excellent community partners. And in fact, I've managed to connect a few of my students in the past with these internships. It's a great way to go beyond spending a semester or a little bit of each week working with the community and really engaging. Second way in which I'd like to forge stronger and wider connections beyond Loyola involves a kind of synergy between research and social justice. So again, medium term, there are 2 things in particular that I'm thinking about here. One is bringing advocates and experts in the field of social justice to Loyola as guests of the honors program as a kind of inspiration for the kinds of research that we're doing. So advocates for social justice don't work in a kind of vacuum. Their work is informed by scholarship, or at least it can be and ought to be. It's a great way to have a better effect on the world. Right? What I'd like to do with regard to this is get us to a point where we can have a kind of dialogue with advocates for social justice who can tell us what they need to know, right? What kinds of things they can learn from folks like you who are in a position to do good academic research. Now this should go in both directions too, right? Research can be an inspiration for advocating for social justice, in particular honors core courses that are on topics that invite folks in the program to make concrete contributions to social justice in the world beyond Loyola would be something that I'd be shooting for as part of a Loyola core. For example, an honors seminar, let's say, on history of slavery in North America, would form a great basis for people who are interested or who become interested in going outside of Loyola's comfy boundaries and doing some concrete things in the world to address the lasting legacy of slavery. In the long term, I'd like to encourage honors students to think about their senior theses as an opportunity to make the world a better place through research. And without trying to embarrass anybody in the room, I'll single out Marissa Hirschit, who's doing, I think, paradigmatic work on exactly this right now. Her senior thesis is on value drift within the effective altruism community, and it's exactly what I'm thinking about. She's using cutting-edge sociology, right, to figure out how to keep people from drifting away from altruistic values. Seems like a perfect example of the kind of thing I have down the line. To be sure, it doesn't have to be the case that every single senior thesis is motivated by nothing other than this, but I think that's a good goal for us to be thinking about. It's an excellent opportunity to realize some of the values of the program. Yeah, please.
Would you allow theses only to be done within the major, or would they be on any topic that interests the student and that they want to put research into?
That's a good question. I think the short answer to that would be it depends. What it depends on is whether the kind of project that the student wanted to do a thesis outside of his or her major area, whether the student was prepared to do it. Right? You don't want to set people up for failure in this case. But that would have to be decided in tandem with the student, the advisor, and the director of the honors program. And I should mention that while I'm one of Marissa's advisors, I'm actually in philosophy and she's in sociology. So that, I suppose, provides at least a partial answer. Thanks for the question. Also, note that this essentially addresses one of the questions I was asked. The question was something of the form, look, do you see the program primarily as involved with research or scholarship, or do you see it primarily as a vehicle for activism or the like? I'm not getting that wording quite right there, sorry about that. Or a third option, do you see it as a blend between the two? I'm going to give you option 4. Really, I see it as a kind of a synergistic relationship with social justice informing research, and research informing social justice, and the result being something greater than the mere sum of the parts. Let me also address the second objective, enhancing the honors community, by which, of course, I mean the community of honors students, but not only that, also honors faculty and all of the relevant stakeholders, including alumni and alumni. So one of the things I'd like to develop as director of the program is a system of mentorship. Let me talk about that really quickly. In the medium term, that would be mentorship within the program itself. So second and third year honors students can serve as mentors for first year mentees. You probably remember quite vividly what it was like to make the transition from high school students to university students, in an honors program no less. It's pretty daunting, and a system of mentorship, being connected with somebody, not just a fellow class member, somebody in your cohort, but with somebody who's been in the program for a while, knows the ropes and the like, can be a huge help. It's a nice exemplification of service being men and women with and for others. It also is a nice way to start breaking down boundaries between different class years, different cohorts. My sources tell me that's something that's somewhat slow to break down, and it results in slightly bluntish outcomes. I think this is a great way to get around that and forge connections across what would otherwise be boundaries that were, again, slow to break down. Needn't stop there either, right? In the long term, I'd like to see the culture of mentorship extend to recent alumni. Just as the transition between high school and college is quite difficult, so it is between college and professional life. And having folks who are recent graduates of the honors program helping you in your, say, senior year make that transition would be an excellent resource for you. And in addition to that, it would help keep the recent graduates of the program connected with it, and there's really no reason to believe that your life as part of the honors program simply ends when you get your diploma. When you're a jet for life, something along those lines. Also, I want to talk briefly about empowerment and self-governance. Another way in which I think the community can be enhanced is by giving all of you an opportunity to be more involved. Let me address that a little bit. In the medium term, I think the following steps should be taken. First, representatives of the honors students should be meeting with the director on a regular basis, a monthly basis at least. It's really important for the director to know what's going on in the program, what things are working, what things aren't working, what might become a problem, what might not. That's the kind of information that shouldn't reach the director only at a point where large steps or difficult steps have to be taken. But it shouldn't be the case that the kind of contact between honor students and the director only is mediated between representatives. There should be semi-annual town halls in forums like this, where everyone is able to voice his or her concerns, where everyone is able to say with clarity and be able to argue for the kinds of positions that are near and dear to the heart, the concerns and how the various kinds of visions that themselves have for the program and what won't. The idea is to build consensus for change going forward with the program. In the long term, what I'm really shooting for here is something along the following lines. Modeling social justice in our community. We do a pretty good job of talking the talk when it comes to social justice, but certainly we need to walk the walk as well. And social justice should be the kind of thing we exemplify in the honors program here. It also means accountability for the director as well. Let me say quickly what the third idea is here with respect to enhancing community, and that I think will be all I have time for. That's the matter of space exploration. And the space I've got in mind is not a dark one filled with stars, but rather the current honor space in the library. In the medium term, I think what the director who comes in needs to do is get a sense of what's possible for that space. I genuinely am not sure at this point, but there needs to be some kind of clarity on part of the director in figuring out what can be done there. And once that's clear, right, something like survey needs to be taken of the honor students and the like. they need to be able to give voice to the kind of space that they want. In the long term, the idea here is to make the honor space a place that honor students, and for that matter, honors faculty would want to be. Okay? That's yet another important stage, providing a kind of medium or forum in which folks can interact and develop. And there's also this business about the canis lupus familiaris on orbis, better known as the honors I like dogs a lot. I do not understand exactly what's going on with the honors dog, but this is a conversation that the director should certainly have with folks. I'll leave it at that, I suppose. And finally, I'll just mention that this too was one of the questions that I was asked, what to do with the honors space. That essentially is my answer. That's, I believe, all I have time for. So I will, again, make all of my written answers available to these questions, and I'd just like to thank you for your attention.
Alrighty guys, so we have our final candidate of the night. We have Dr. Clark. She is a professor of music history and a longtime faculty member of the Honors Program. She received both her Master's in Fine Arts and her PhD from Peterson University. Before Loyola, she's taught at Notre Dame University, Ohio State, Penn State, and University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. Hope I pronounced it right. Her area of research includes Late medieval music, especially aspects of the motet in 14th century France. If I mispronounce it, it is what it is. She's particularly concerned in teaching how music works in cultures, whether it's in a medieval cathedral or a 20th century opera house. And while she teaches mostly courses for music majors, she, has taught surveys for non-music majors, including a survey of Western art music from antiquity through the Baroque era, and an annual seminar on opera, which sounds cool, and I wish I would have known about it. In my time, so let's give it up for Dr. Clark.
Long days. I figured, because Dr. McGregor suggested we might want to give you some written answers to your questions, I would do that and either go through things briefly or open it up, just whatever you guys want at this point. So, I don't have a presentation or anything like that. Would you rather focus on your questions? I realize you've just been given something that I don't expect you to read right now, but I can summarize things a little bit. So maybe we'll start with your questions and then we can go wherever y'all want from there. So your first question, sorry, be aware of that. So your first question deals with academic requirements and flexibility. So the requirements, I figure, especially the disciplinary requirements, exist for a reason, right? You're supposed to get a broad overview of things. Therefore, we can't just kind of ignore them entirely. But we all know that honors seminars are often inherently interdisciplinary. My own seminars have often counted both for the arts requirement and for literature, especially if we're reading a lot of literature. So I think that is a strength of the program and something we would need to keep. I am aware there is sometimes concerns about substitutions being done unfairly or not regularly or not with any kind of process, just kind of by whim. And I do wonder if UHAP shouldn't be involved in setting those, at the very least, set them up front, which is often what's been done. But I think there has to be some flexibility on that level. And things happen, right? Despite the most careful advising, and I've seen this with my own advisees, you're a senior, you have one seminar left, and that seminar conflicts with some required course for your major. So we need the honors contract. There's always going to have to be a place for flexibility. I think much of that can be dealt with careful advising and planning. So I would want to minimize it, but it just simply has to happen. And let me just suggest that anytime you have a follow-up question or something, let me know. Otherwise, I will move on to perhaps more interesting questions. Vision. This is a great question, and one that I don't think is for me by myself to come in with a canned answer to. I think this is something for the next director to work out with all of you and everyone else in the community. This is a chance for communal discernment. Which actually, if I can skip to fold in the next question, what's the first thing I want to change? I think we're in pretty good shape right now. And this is a blessing, because that means we can take the time to figure out where we go next. One thing I would like to think about is better integration of honors with the major. This is something that we talked about, that we tried, didn't quite get off the ground, but I'm aware that in some ways, because most of honors maps onto the core, it can feel distant from the major, especially if your major is not well represented in the core. And the thesis can kind of come out of thin air, especially if you're in a field that doesn't have a thesis requirement built in. So I think we could bridge those a little bit better. That's one thing I'd like us to talk about, but beyond that, we get to dream a little bit. And I think whoever the next director is has the blessing of not having any serious problems, anything that needs changing right away, anything major at least. And that means we can build a vision. And that's where I would rather go with that. Oh, you did ask about academically focused or whatever. Yeah, I'm an academic, I'm academically focused. And to fold in the questions about what to do about the castle and co-curricular activities and all of that, I thought that another of the great strengths of this program is UHAP, that you guys are responsible for your co-curricular activities. And I would want to continue that. The director should support you, but let you do your thing. I'll confess, I've never been in the tower or the castle. I've only heard about them. And the director should spend time in that space, but those are your spaces, and that's for you to determine, I think. Interaction with other universities. This was fun because we've never really done it before. Some of you know that in some areas, and this is certainly true in my field, that chain link fence is like the Grand Canyon. I go to Tulane to use their library, and I don't know most of their music faculty. The only one I really know did her master's degree here. That's why I know her. No, there's one other. I saw her at a conference in Boston a couple of weekends ago. I haven't seen her in town in I don't know how long. But honors collaboration, I think there's real opportunity. I discovered when looking at Xavier's website, one of the people I know over there is the director of their new honors program. So yeah, I could call up Joanna and say, let's do stuff. And none of you students are going to know Garrett Fontenot, but faculty will. He graduated from this program in 2012. He is now let me get the title right, the Senior Program Coordinator of Tulane's Honors Program. Well, the Grand Canyon just got a bridge. So I think there's a lot of opportunities here. And within the AJCU, I know Loyola's been involved with the AJCU Honors Program, Honors Conference, I also know the director of the St. Peter's Honors Program because we are both members of the National Seminar on Jesuit Higher Education. So that gives me a few people to start to call up to create these links, and I think it's a good opportunity for all of us. Okay, I'm seeing follow-ups, so that's okay. Professionalism. I took this to mean kind of what I think you should look like as graduates. And one of the phrases I go back to is one of Kolbenbach's, that to form people of, quote, competence, conscience, and compassionate commitment. And I tried to unpack that a little bit in my written response, but I want you to be open to stuff. I want you to become aware of all of our world, the gritty reality, the beauty, to foster within you, and I know it's already within many of you, that desire to change things and to make them better, whatever that means for you. But it's mostly about the journey, not the destination, especially while you're here. So I really kind of start with being open to things, new ideas, new people, new ways of thinking about the world. And your last question is about keeping honors separate while engaging with the community. I'm someone who's had to think about having multiple identities around here. What I do is fundamentally in the humanities. But I'm in a college whose identity keeps changing, but I am in a sphere of the arts, right? These don't have to be contradictory. As a matter of fact, if we were in any of the other 26 Jesuit colleges or universities, we would all be in the same college. But here we're separated. So I'm a humanist in the arts. I teach in honors, I do other things. We all have multiple identities. And it's just finding a way to balance all of those. I do have some experience, kind of, again, foot in the music building, foot in Beauvais, even though my office is in Monroe. And I do think of that as a bridging sort of position, one that all of you live as well. So it's a matter of our figuring out how to build those bridges and occasionally push back if we need to make sure that you get whatever it is you need from your major, from honors, from all of the other stuff going on on campus. So multiple identities, we all live multiple identities. So we figure out how to do that. I have given at least a brief introduction to my answers to these questions. Is there anything I need to elaborate on, Max?
When you talk about having conversations with students and kind of gauging feedback, what does that look like to you concretely? Would you have town halls like this? Would you survey them? How would you plan on getting feedback?
For building a vision, or for,
yeah.
Okay.
Or in general feedback about what students want to see different,
Yeah, I think that needs to be dealt with in a number of different ways. If we're doing something fairly concrete about what activities do you want next year, we could start with a survey that has the benefit of being anonymous and letting you deal with that outside of time and space. Town halls can be valuable because everyone is here, or at least nearly everyone, and that gives you guys a place to magnify your voice as well. focus groups, small interest groups. I think you try to get information wherever you can. I have not had much opportunity to use this, but in terms of things like mission and vision, we might want to engage in some communal discernment, which can be things like a group of people, probably not quite a town hall because that would be too many, but a smaller group where everyone has a say independently and we filter that down and through. But I think there need to be a variety of ways for communication, including just one-on-one, stop by the office and say, hey.
What initially interested you about applying for this position?
Honors is a special group. I've been involved in honors in various ways for a long time now. I honestly have applied for this job at least once when it came open in the past. It is an opportunity to work on a slightly different level. I love teaching, I love being in the classroom. Sometimes if you're on a slightly different level, you can affect more by affecting more students. There are obviously more of you than I have in any classroom cohort in a given semester. Also by affecting things like curriculum and faculty. So sometimes you can do things that are a little bit bigger. Not that small isn't valuable, but sometimes you have a little bit more scope to do things that are a little bit bigger.
I also had a question. You mentioned attaching the thesis more to the honors experience and more to the major as well. What were your ideas about bridging kind of the majors to the honors experience and the thesis?
I want to find out what other places do. When we talked about it a few years ago, when we were talking about that a few years ago, there was talk of having one or two classes within the major that might help lead to the thesis. This is a little bit hard logistically when we all know it's a struggle to get faculty for seminars and thesis supervision, but it could be, in most majors, it probably could not be a dedicated honors class. It probably would have to be an existing class with an honors component, which could be another good use of the honors contract process. So if we could identify pre-capstone sorts of courses in every major, and not every major has a capstone, but most every major has something that could be. For instance, and I know programs outside of music, and I know the music one's best. Your music industry, Max?
Composition.
Composition, okay. Composition recital, easily a capstone project. And there are lessons that lead up to that. So we figure out a way of creating an honors component for that to lead into the thesis. Where a thesis exists, it's probably a little bit easier, but that kind of